Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this video, my friends and I would like to explain the chapter 11 entitled Grading and Student Evaluation. Before that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Risqi, Indah, Laili, and my other friends are Keken Nurnezsa, Elysa Agustina, and Tri Ayuningsih. And we are from Language Assessment and Evaluation D class. And these are the outlines that we will explain later. And the next is, let's move on to the first outline.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Keken Nurnezsa and I want to explain about the philosophy of grading. What should grades reflect? The first one is consistency. It is essential for all components of grading to be consistent with an institutional philosophy and or regulations. For example, mandate deduction for unexcused absences. Others require that only for final exam that determines a course grades. Still, other institutions may implicitly dictate a relatively high number of AS and BS for each class of students. Next is transparency. All of the components of the final grade need to be explicitly stated in writing to students. The next is specificity. It is important to recognize the subjectivity. Challenge yourself to create checklist, chart, and note-taking system that allow you to convey to the students the basis for your conclusion. And the last one is weighting. Designations of 5% to 10% of a grade to such factor will not mask strong achievement in a course. The next, I want to explain about calculating grades, absolute and relative grading. The key to making an absolute grading system work is to be painstakingly clear on competencies and objectives and on tests, tasks, and other assessment techniques that will factor into the formula for assigning a grade. If you are unclear and haphazard in your definition of criteria for grading, the grades you ultimately assign are relatively meaningless. Relative grading is more commonly used than absolute grading. It has the advantage of allowing your own interpretation and of adjusting for unpredicted ease of difficult of a test. Relative grading is usually accomplished by ranking students in order for performance percentile ranks and assigning cutoff points of grades. That would be one solution to adjust for difficulty, but another solution would be to adjust those percentile deviations to account for one and more of the following.
Teachers' perception of appropriate grade distribution. Most teachers bring to a test or a course evaluation and interpretation of estimated appropriate distribution. Follow that interpretation and make minor adjustments to compensate for such matter as unexpected difficulty. Two conclusions were drawn from this insight. First, teachers may hypothetically subscribe to a preselected set of expectations, but in practice may not conform to those expectations. Second, teachers all agreed they were guilty of grade inflation at the ALE. Their good nature and empathy for students predisposed them toward assigning grades that were higher than ALE standards and expectation. Institutional expectation and constraints. A consideration of philosophies of grading and procedures for calculating grades is not complete without a focus on the role of the institution in determining grades. For many institutions around the world, the concept of letter grades is foreign. Institutions use neither a letter grade nor a numerical system of evaluation, and instead offer narrative evaluation of students. This preference for more individualist evaluation is often a reaction to the overgeneration of letter and numerical grading, cultural norms, and the question of difficulty. 1. It is unheard of to ask a student to self-assess performance. 2. The teacher assign a grade and no one question the teacher's criteria. 3. The measure of a good teacher is one who can design a test that is so difficult that no student can achieve a perfect score. 4. As a corollary, grades of a reserved for a high selected few and students are delighted with BS. 5. One single final examination is the accepted determinant of a student's entire course grade. 6. The notion of a teacher preparing students to do their best on a test is an educational contradiction. In some cultures, a hard test is a good test, but in others, a good test results in a distribution such as the one in the bar graph. For the great bunch, a large proportion of S and BS, a few CS, and maybe a D or an F for very poor performers in the class. It is usually a combination of a number of possible factors. You will learn something from those anomalies in your pedagogical life, and the next time you will change the test, better prepare your students or better predict your students' performance.
My name is Risqi and Laili, and I want to continue the explanation of institutional expectation and constraints, and the point is, what do letter grades mean? An institutional grading philosophy involves expectation for grading, distribution, and a meaning or description for each grade. Letter descriptors are frequently listed in institutional manuals for teachers and students. Those are A for excellent, B for good, C for adequate, D for unsatisfactory, and F for unacceptable. Letter grades are ostensibly a holistic number that sums up a variety of performances during the length of a course. Each score category of holistic writing and speech output grading describes up to 6 separate competencies that are being met. And there are two solutions on the semantic conundrum. The first is, any teacher who utilizes letter grades to deliver an evaluation should utilize a carefully established grading system, issue grades based on specified criteria, create criteria based on course or evaluation procedures objectives, and the last is, educators around the world must try to persuade the world's gatekeepers that letter or numerical evaluations are just one of a larger picture of students' abilities. And the next outline is scoring and grading tests and assignments. And the first point is scoring method. These are the examples of fill in the blank and multiple choice questions. Both of them are scored either right or wrong. This is called as a dichotomous scoring, which the correct answer receives 1 point and the incorrect answer receives 0 point. A response can have various levels of correctness ranging from 0 to 1 to 2 in addition to right or wrong grading. This is called as polytomous scoring or partial credit scoring. It is useful when restricted response must account multiple aspects of linguistic competence. Partial credit scoring has advantage for allowing us to collect more information about students' language competence than a single score. However, there is a disadvantage of partial credit scoring. It's because the levels of accuracy must be clearly recognized and defined when the test questions are written. This results more difficulty in scoring key.
Hi, my name is Tri Ayuningsih, and I will explain about scoring open-ended responses and developing a rubric. For open-ended, performance-based learner response, use rating scales or what are more commonly known as rubrics to score these types of test tasks. A rubric or scale lists the criteria or characteristic a student response should show at different levels for those criteria. The criteria or description of what is acceptable performance at different levels should be based on the language abilities that the test is measuring. According to Reddy and Andre's 2010 review of rubrics used in higher education, found that rubrics not only were beneficial for teachers, but also the students were able to better focus on their efforts. Next is explanation about developing a rubric. A rubric is structured like a matrix. Criteria of the construct or ability the list along one side, and the different levels of the criteria are listed along the other side. Defining the ability or construct measured. The components of the ability are the criteria that its response must contain. It is also important to decide whether using to score a response holistically or analytically, because the criteria must be combined for the former and separate for the latter for its level in the rubric. Holistic rubrics are useful when for administrative purposes. It is impractical to break down student performance into separate categories, each with its own separate score. For analytic rubrics offer more information to the teacher and student in terms of several subcategories or performance. Determining levels. How many levels to include in rubric also depends on the purpose of the rubric and what the score conveys. Just 2 rating levels can be used to show the presence or absence of a criterion or whether a standard was met. Writing descriptors for each level. Writing the descriptor for each level is the final part of process. Successful descriptors should describe observable and measurable behavior. Next is guideline for rubric development. Step 1 is define the construct or ability to be measured by the task. Next step is identify specific observable attributes that you want to see your student demonstrate in their product, process, or performance. Next step is describe the scale or level of performance. Next step is for holistic rubrics again. For holistic rubrics, complete the rubric by describing other levels on the continuum that ranges from excellent to poor work for the collective student. For final step is revise the rubric as necessary.
I want to explain about the guidelines for grading and evaluation. The first one is develop and implement a comprehensive personal philosophy of grading that is consistent with your philosophy of teaching and evaluation. The second is ascertain an institution's philosophy of grading and, unless otherwise negotiated, conform to that philosophy.
3. Design tests that conform to appropriate institutional and cultural expectation of the difficulty that students should experience. 4. Select appropriate criteria for grading, key or rubric, and their relative weight in calculating grades.
And the next is communicate criteria for grading to the students at the beginning of the course and at subsequent grading periods such as midterm and final. And the last is triangulate letter grade evaluation with alternatives that are more formative and that give more washback. And that was our presentation. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope you guys understand the explanation of grading and students evaluation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.